Hi everyone. We're going to continue on with The Wild Robot. We're on chapter 85. When we left off, Roz was reunited with her son Brightbill, and she has a new body, but still her same mind. And she was able to convince Brightbill that she was Brightbill's mom. So this chapter is called The Guests. After traveling in secret, after running in fear, our friends were safe at last. But their problems weren't over yet. Although Roz had a brand new body, she had the same old mind, and most humans simply weren't ready for an emotional, curious, wild robot. There was only one place where she could be her true self, and it was still far, far away. Dr. Malovo, you have already been so kind to me and my son, said the robot, but I must ask you for one last favor. Can you guess what she's going to ask? The woman sat back in her chair. Could you take us home in your airship? The woman laughed. Well, of course I will. How else would you get to an island in the middle of the ocean? Time and again, Roz had dreamed of flying back to her island in an airship, but she had never thought it would actually happen, until now. It's no trouble, the woman went on. We can have you home in a few hours, but I insist that you and Brightbill stay a while, here in my apartment. You both deserve some peace and comfort, and I'd love the company. There was no arguing with Dr. Malovo, and our friends agreed to stay a while. The robot butler took care of everything, and everyone, in the apartment, and that included guests. Roz felt funny accepting help from a robot, but Brightbill happily soaked up the attention. The butler fed him fantastic salads made from exotic leafy plants. The butler placed a little pool in the living room so he could swim whenever he liked. And there's Brightbill in his little pool. The butler built a cozy bed that was just the right size and shape for the young goose. Brightbill had never been so comfortable. Dr. Malovo divided her time between her guests and her work. She would sit around chatting with Roz and Brightbill, and then suddenly head down to the factory with some urgent task. She had to design new robots. She had to supervise the makers and the recos. She had to manage all of the tech lab industries. Even at her old age, Dr. Malovo was still consumed by a passion for robots. If you love your job, it never feels like work, she'd say, smiling and strolling out the door. When the host was working, the guests had the apartment to themselves. Roz spent hours browsing the bookshelves. She read about art and science and the history of robots. And there's Roz reading all the books in the library. She read about art and science and the history of robotics. Brightbill waddled from room to room and explored every corner of the sprawling apartment. But there was a favorite activity, and that was standing by the windows, gazing across the city, and surveying the incredible sights. I can see the bridge where Strutter tracked me down, said Brightbill. And that's the building where I first met Graybeak. And there's the roof where you fell. Look, far in the distance, another spaceship is taking off, said Roz. It could be flying to the space station, or the moon, or beyond. I think that skyscraper is actually a greenhouse, said Brightbill. I flew past it and saw nothing but plants inside. Roz and Brightbill enjoyed their time in Dr. Malovo's apartment, but they missed their friends in the wilderness and the island. After a few days, the guests were growing restless. They were ready to go home. Chapter 86, The Flight. Sitting on the pavement, glinting in the sun, was a sleek white airship. For so long, those white ships had filled the robot with dread. Now one was about to solve all her problems. The door hummed open, and Dr. Malovo, Roz, and Brightbill climbed aboard. Once they were comfortable, the woman spoke to the airship. Take us to the island where Rosam Unit 7134 was found. The engines fired up, and the ship lifted off. It floated high into the air, turned to the north, and started cruising above the city. The three of them quietly watched the buildings and streets pass below. The city seemed to go on forever. But as they flew faster and further, it slowly gave way to towns and countrysides. They crossed the hard edge of the coastline, and then there was only the ocean and the sky and the airship. And there they are. Who would have thought that they would be inside of one of those airships that were so scary to them? The ocean was deep. However, scattered throughout the dark depths were shallow areas, sandbars, reefs, islands just under the waves. In places, bizarre rock formations stuck up from the shallows. Or were they ruins of old buildings? The mysterious shapes faded behind the airship and were replaced by more dark depths. She flew on and the hours flew by. Gradually, fluffy clouds came into view on the edge of the horizon. Beneath the clouds was a faint smudge of green. The island. It grew closer and bigger, and then Roz was gazing out at all the places she'd missed. The rocky shore, the mountain and the waterfall, the forests and the meadows and the ponds. Air blasted toward the ground as the ship lowered itself into a grassy clearing. It gently touched down. The engines powered off. Chapter 87. The Homecoming. The airship's door hummed open and our robot stepped outside. Everything was silent and still. But Roz knew hidden animals were watching, and she greeted them with a mighty roar. Animals of the island, I have returned. I may look different, but I promise you, I am your old friend Roz. Her words boomed across the island, but the only response was her own voice echoing back. The wild robot needed to be wilder. She reached down and started smearing handfuls of mud across her body. Then she pressed clumps of weeds and flowers into her muddy coating until she looked more like her old wild self. Brightbill fluttered out from the airship and perched on Roz's shoulder. He shook his tail feathers and squawked, "It's true! This robot is my mother! Come and see for yourselves!" Silence. And then the bushes began to rustle. Faces began poking out from trees. Animals began scurrying and trotting and flying into the meadow. At first they moved cautiously, confused as to how this new robot could be their old friend. But they saw her wild appearance and they heard her wild voice, and news began spreading across the island. Roz was back! A crowd of friendly creatures gathered around our robot. There was Brightbill's flock, and the beaver and deer families, and Fink the fox, and Swooper the owl. Bears came lumbering down from the hills, and fish jumped up from the ponds, and vultures circled above. Even the nocturnal creatures crawled out from their burrows into daylight to join the celebration. Oh, how good it feels to return from a long journey and find your friends and family waiting for you. But reader, sometimes we return and find things that aren't exactly as we left them. As you know, the wilderness can be a harsh place, and while Roz was away, it had claimed its share of her friends. The robot saw the raccoons, Lumpkin and Bumpkin, but not Rumpkin. Nor did she see Broadfoot the moose, or Dig Down the groundhog. Other creatures were missing as well, and so, like many of our homecomings, this one was bittersweet. Chit-Chat the squirrel came bounding through the grass, chattering on and on as usual. "I always knew you'd come back to us, Roz, but I never imagined you'd gain so much weight, although I guess I've gained a little weight myself. Anyway, you'll have to tell me about your adventures, and when you get a chance, I'm sorry for talking so much, I'm just so excited to see you again." Geese and beavers and deer and fish and squirrels and owls and bears and turtles and otters and raccoons and woodpeckers and opossums and moose and foxes and every kind of creature from every corner of the island were coming to welcome back their dear friends Roz and Brightbill. And watching it all from the airship was Dr. Malovo. I'm going to stop there for today. Our next chapter is called The Final Farewell, and that will be the last part to our story. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.